So on one of the last times that we were in the studio here, we talked about buying what was at the time one of the cheapest NSXs, first generation NSXs to have ever changed hands. And we bought it with about 200,000 miles on the clock. Since then, it's become our sort of road trip and racetrack conveyance, and it's been very, very reliable. We've driven across 40 different states. The car has driven around, I think, 33 different road racing circuits at this point in time. It's been pretty bulletproof, but it finally happened at 315,000 miles. We actually had kind of what ended up being a little bit of a major failure. We picked up some rod knock and ended up having to do more work than we expected to get the car back running. So this started at NS Expo, and this is the NSX Club's annual event that kind of travels around, and it was in Phoenix, Arizona in 2022. We drove the car from our home in East Tennessee. Actually, both my wife and I drove, fortunately, both of our NSXs. She had just bought hers that spring, and that will be an important detail. And we drove both cars out for this event because it was going to be her first expo with her car. We got out there, and then the first thing on the docket was a track event at a circuit that's out there kind of just south of Phoenix. And in doing so, I did the whole day at the track. Everything seemed fine, but coming off the track after the last session, rod knock. Real bad news. I wasn't sure at first. I had hopes it was something else. Like, I don't know, a section of exhaust was loose and knocking on a frame rail or making some other noise like that. Fortunately, we had enough expert ears present at the event to kind of help me kind of give it a listen. Use a little screwdriver or stethoscope and confirm that, no, this was probably internal and probably bad news. Kind of in the vein of convenient inconvenience, one of the sponsors of the event is probably also one of the most highly regarded NSX, maintenance, repair, and build shops in the US, and they're based out of Phoenix. So we said, hey, we're just going to leave it with you guys. We finished doing the event. We managed to kind of leverage the entertaining utility of the NSX as a road trip car to move all the stuff that was necessary out of my car and into my wife's NSX to then finish out the social portion of NS Expo and drive back to Tennessee. This is kind of one of those unusual failures. Like 315,000 miles, you think for most cars, yeah, sure, stuff can go wrong at that point in time. Like, why are you surprised? Well, it's only surprising because the engines in the first generation NSX are really fairly robust. One thing that probably exacerbated it was that between 200,000 miles when we bought the car and the 315,000 miles that were on it when it failed, 10,000 of those miles were around racetracks. So 10,000 track miles, and I can't remember what the general rule of thumb though is that 10 miles on the track is worth about 1,000 miles on the road. It's just because of the extra added heat, stress. You're just asking more of everything to push the car to that, whatever 8 or 9 tenths of its limits. And I'm not going to say I can wring an NSX out for 10 tenths. But even at my modest skill level, you can kind of, you're asking more of the car certainly than you would on a public road. We figure there were a few theories about what happened for this initial failure. One possibility is that it was just that time and the combination of some, bearing clearances having opened up with that kind of use and that kind of mileage maybe just precipitated, a lack of oil flow through one of the bearing journals, main bearing journals, and the associated rod bearing. The other thing, which is kind of speaking to the kind of, if there's an Achilles heel to driving a first generation NSX on the track, it is its transverse engine layout. So transverse engine layout, that means the engine kind of sits, most of you know this, I'm sure, preaching to the choir here, but it sits across the car instead of along the car. What this means, though, is that the oil pan sits kind of lengthways across the car instead of along the car. So when you start to get into high lateral G with modern tires, you can oil starve them on long. Usually the kiss of death for an NSX is a long right-hand turn where you are in the VTEC. So you're over 6,000 RPM at reasonably high throttle, because the VTEC systems in the NSX, it has VTEC on both the intakes and the exhaust, and those are oil actuated. So if you're if VTEC has kicked in, then you could have as much as like 1.5 quarts of oil in each head out of the 5.5 quarts that are called for in an oil change. And usually the common wisdom is when you go in and track an NSX, you want to add kind of just an extra 1/2 quart. It won't really overfill anything because you're going to have that oil being displaced out of the pan most of the time. But that's the other kind of theory, is that we probably could have run into an oil starvation issue because the track we were at the time, it was a lot of not very long right-hand turns, but it was also very hot that day. If we did get a situation where we sloshed all the oil away from the pickup, even briefly, especially at the age of the engine, that was probably enough to scuff the offending bearing. May have exposed that Achilles heel of the NSX, although we did have people that are watching this can be like, why don't you put didn't you put a baffle in the oil pan? Why didn't you run an AccuSump? Well, I generally had been running street tires, so I hadn't felt the need for an AccuSump. We did have a baffle in the oil pan. I think part of the problem is the advancement of tire technology, though, is meaning that like the street tire, the 200 tread wear street tires that you would track 10 years ago, nowhere near as sticky as the same rated tire today. And so you're just generating more lateral G. Generally speaking, the common wisdom has always been on the first gen NSXs that you don't need to do anything too crazy until you're running either slicks or aero. However, I kind of question that wisdom, and we may be doing some things going forward to further sort of harden the oiling system to avoid repeat performances. Having had our failure in Arizona, we left it with this very trusted shop to do the work on the car. They went to put the engine back together, and we thought about this. We're like, hey, while we're doing this, we should do something a little bit extra with the oiling system. So we went to another very trusted third party and ordered an oversized oil pump from them. And these in theory would flow a little better. They would flow more oil at a higher pressure, and the gears were made out of a more robust material. So I was like, okay, so we're going to build this a little bit more robust. We've got this thing that's going to be more resilient against being destroyed by an over rev. It's also going to flow more oil at a higher pressure, which means we'll have a better chance of maintaining pressure more of the time. Got that ordered in, had it delivered to the shop that was putting the engine back together. They had the engine all balanced out to like within a gram. So we were effectively going to be getting back an NSX Type R engine from a function and balance standpoint. I was really stoked and curious to see the difference. And so they put the car back together. They got it, they put some break-in miles on it of their own. We picked the car up in, I think, March of this year. We actually drove around because we know some other people in the Phoenix area. We drove around, visited a few people, both with the interest of seeing friends and also putting our own confirmation miles on the car before we took off 2,000 miles back home. We kind of did that for a day and a half, and then we're like, okay, we're taking off for home. So we took off for home on a weekend, and we made it to about New Mexico. We made it to the Mexico border, and as we kind of crossed the border and we're approaching Gallup, things started going downhill real fast. So I noticed that on our new data display, the coolant temperature and oil temperature had started to kind of creep up, and I was noticing the oil pressure start to drop in a fairly linear and unfortunately precipitous fashion. And seeing the writing on the wall there, like, this is really not going to be good. I only kept in the power long enough to kind of get over a crest of a hill, at which point cut the ignition and coasted it off this exit. Fortunately, we coasted off this exit ramp, which was all downhill, and directly into the parking lot of a hotel that, in fact, had vacancies for that night. We're then faced with the challenge of finding somebody that would tow a car from New Mexico back to Phoenix in short order. That got kind of interesting. However, we ended up lucking out again there as we made a few phone calls. Mainly my wife made a few phone calls while I was out shaking my fist at the clouds or whatever it was. Got the car towed back down and got in touch with the owner of the shop, and understandably very concerned what had happened. And he's like, okay, well, we're going to take a look at it immediately. He put us on a flight back to Knoxville. So then we flew back and kind of waited for news, and none of it was good. The damage at this point was actually worse than where we had started. So originally we just had like one crank journal, one rod bearing. Okay, sure. This was, the crank again. And then we also had all the rod bearings now were gone, and the block had been superheated in places. So there was going to be some really high stakes line boring, like machining processes needed to sort the block back out. And at this point, we've already paid for one rebuild, and so the economics of it start to really kind of close in on you a little bit. We then started looking around at our options. So it was going to take about the same amount of money, probably more, given the hours of high skill machine work needed to put the car back together a second time, because we're going to have to get a second crank. more rods, more bearings. And I will say that had we taken that route, the offer was on the table from both the engine builder and the shop that supplied the parts, or the shop that supplied the oil pump. There were offers on the table of being able to source parts. However, from an overall cost and timing and just getting the car back standpoint, after kind of doing the math, we ended up coming up with a different option, which is what we ended up doing. There are several engines or manufacturers of engines that are kind of known for being a little bit of kind of Lego set-ish. Like, stuff just kind of fits on other stuff. And as luck would have it, the Acura Honda C-Series motors are not an exception to this. We did luck out a little bit because our heads were fine. And NSX heads, nearly unobtainium at this point. But ours had survived. The oil filter, I guess, had done its job in keeping debris out from getting up that far in the system. So all of our cams and and the VTEC actuation systems and stuff like that that's up in the heads, that all survived. Needed a little bit of a cleanup, but was otherwise good to go. So really, we ended up looking for a short block. So we needed the bottom end. We needed the block, reciprocating assembly, crank, pistons, rods, and then the kind of lower ancillaries, the oil pump. We needed another one of those now. We started digging around for that. And we found that getting a 3-liter, which would have been the original type of engine that was in the car, getting the C30A bottom end, there are no more new short blocks in the world that we know of. Somebody might have one in a collection that's still in a wrapper, but as far as ordering one from Honda or Acura, it's not going to happen right now. However, because the NSX had such a long production run from 1991, or at least in the US, model year 1991 to 2004, you have those later cars that they're still sort of, I think, obliged in some cases to maintain parts for a certain period of time. I think they're probably beyond that, but they were, having parts around for that, for those cars. And the later cars, you don't have the mileage and attrition with the NA2 cars that you do with the NA1 cars. So we were able to find that, or we found through our engine builder that you were able to get, they would be able to order a C32B short block from Japan. And it was a known cost, but the problem was it was an unknown timeline. Because of how the request and receipt and delivery process worked, we could have been, out of car for much, much, much longer. Fortunately, we had asked around, and a very nice gentleman who we're friends with had one on the shelf of his collection. It was still in the wrapper from Honda, and onshore was the key point. So I had a C32B bottom end onshore in the United States that he was graciously willing to sell us, with the understanding that he could get another one. It wasn't like the last one in the world. So we did confirm that through a couple of different sources before before following through. We bought this C32B bottom end. They put that back together, and the kind of consulting with a few different folks, we figured out that with the 3.2 liter bottom end and the 3 liter heads, you could actually run that off of the stock ECU that was original to the car. At the end of the day, the end of the story here is we have a 3.2 liter factory NSX bottom end that came to us like in the wrapper from Honda. That has our original, still 318,000 mile now, 3 liter heads. I obviously had refreshed, so they have new valve guides and seals and all the other, everything else was given a good once over before it was put back in. And then that's been all put together. That got a adjustable fuel pressure regulator put on it to account for the added displacement. And then they threw that on the dyno just to see kind of what it would do, because they hadn't done this particular combination before. Compared to a bone stock factory NSX, I think you would see around like 250 wheel horsepower. We're somewhere with admittedly having headers, high flow cats, and a more free flowing tailpipe behind it versus a bone stock NSX of the same year. We're still up in the we're getting close to 290 wheel horsepower with this setup. The horsepower, I've noticed that more on the stopwatch. The thing we do notice, though, just driving it around on the butt dyno, is the additional torque. It is definitely noticeable when you can kind of drive out of the hole a little bit more smoothly, especially on a really, really twisty road. We live in East Tennessee. We're right next to the tail of the Dragon. going up there, it used to be always like, second gear, third gear, second gear, third gear, second gear, third gear, but being tempted to go into first gear a couple times, even maybe. We've gone up there more recently for an event that we host, and driving through there were definitely some turns that I would have 100% shifted down to second to drive at sort of a responsibly enthusiastic pace. Rather than shifting down to second, I was able to just sort of roll through the turn in third gear and then pull up the hill with decent pace. That's definitely more noticeable in a day-to-day drivability standpoint, but that's been probably the most noticeable improvement in the car. We picked the car up the second time. They did their dyno testing, kind of put some break-in miles on the car again, and then got it, the fuel pressure tuned correctly and adjusted, and then we flew back out again to Phoenix, drove the car all the way back. It made it all the way back this time. Did a precautionary oil change just because it was a brand new engine, and then did a little bit of, more enthusiastic mountain driving just to kind of, shake things down. And then the next thing we did with it was bring it down here to Atlanta to NS Expo 2023 and did a full track day at Atlanta Motorsports Park as part of that event. If the tail's in the tape is telling a pretty good tale. So we would, I think from my previous visit with the NSX to AMP in 2018, I knocked 3 seconds off of my previous personal best. I haven't gotten any faster or slower as a driver, I don't feel. So that's definitely the car doing the work. And it definitely pulled its weight, and it did, ran beautifully the whole weekend, which I can now see all the data on what the car is doing. So no hiccups from there, and everything went well. The process sucked. We have basically a $30,000 C30A coffee table in the works. We got them to ship us all the block and rods back because I'm at least gonna make that lemonade out of the whole situation. And then having an engine that's fresh, as much as it puts kind of an asterisk on, we got 318,000 miles in the car. It's on its second motor, but I think the balance there is that we can kind of go forward, hunting down more racetracks and more road trip adventures with a little bit less to worry about, and a little more torque never hurts.
Are you looking for the perfect gift for yourself or the automotive enthusiast in your life this holiday season? Well, look no further than Celebrity Machines. They make metal stamped, screen accurate replicas of the license plates that you'll see on the cars in the movies and television shows that you love. They've got almost every one you could possibly imagine. And in fact, if you've gotten one of our Car Trek license plates or the Japanese license plate from my Lamborghini Diablo SV, those were also from Travis. So you may already have some Celebrity Machines license plates hanging up in your garage or in the background of your Zoom calls. But regardless, check them out now. If you go to the link in the description below or use the code VINwiki at checkout, they're going to give you 20% off of your order. So check them out now, get some great gifts, and thank them for their support of VINwiki.